being here tonight. I am the Executive Director of the Brown County Historical Society, so welcome. So I want to make a note before we begin. This program is made possible by the Marjorie F. Giselson Speaker Series and sponsored by Dan and Nancy Giselson, and so we thank them for that. I also want to thank the volunteers, meet and greeters tonight. Thank you very much for everything you've done. To our Board of Trustees, thank you. Staff, wonderful, thank you so much. The presenters, of course, this program would not be possible without you. And then I also want to thank our door prize contributors, Bailey Creek Boutique, Sweet Haven Tonics, and 6Bs. And then, of course, New Cat. Thank you very much for filming this again. We have a wonderful partnership with them. We appreciate it. They will then later share this with us. So most of our programs, whether it be Lunch and a Bite or special programs like this, are later available on our website, or you can find them on our YouTube channel. So if you have friends, family who are not able to make it tonight, this will be available for them in the future. All right, so this program. To begin with, this program has gone through many renditions, and it was not a smooth start. We actually were getting more excited and ready for our main program rather than with our March program, because we were stumbling over it. But then something changed, and I believe that was language. As we were digging into these articles, we were coming into words like soiled doves, a house of ill repute, alienation of affection, and breach of promise. Now, how can you not become intrigued at that point? So our stories tonight are taken from primary and secondary sources during the span of 1890 to 1930. The details have been interpreted as the presenters infused their understandings into gaps of information that we just didn't have. Our characters we have here tonight, they're real people. Their names have been changed. We want to be mindful that these are real people and they're real stories. We are here tonight to honor their human experience and to learn. Though the process of putting this program together, what we found fascinating was what made the news and what made the headlines. One little mishap and she did what? And to tell us more about that, I would like to welcome our MC. Nettie Newsworthy of the Brown County Blabber is here to join us this evening. So we'd like to welcome her to the mic. Thank you guys very much for being here tonight and enjoy the program.
Where did you get those shoes?
That's a secret. Yes. Nettie Newsworthy here. And the Brown County Blabberer. And as Amy said, we've changed some of the names to protect the innocent. Or we may be protecting the guilty. Tonight I'm going to share tips on proper etiquette, what to wear, or what not to wear, situations to avoid, and some interesting stories. So, some of my hints. Do any of you remember wearing nylon stockings? Not pantyhose, nylon stockings, garter belt, the whole. Okay. Did those nylon stockings have seams? Now, is anybody here that doesn't know what that means? Raise your hand. Okay, we have a couple youngsters in the room because many of us knew all about nylons with seams. And you could not leave home until you made sure they were straight. Your brothers weren't any help because they'd say, oh yeah, sure. And then your older sister would say, oh, you can't go out like that. So, lucky for all of you, seams have gone out of style. My next hint, and I may be guilty, when wearing lipstick, make sure it's on your lips, not on your teeth. I heard about a widow in Milford. Some people refer to her as the Milford Merry Widow. Now put yourself into her shoes. She didn't have eHarmony. She did not have the matchmaker. So, ladies, remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And here we have the Milford Merry Widow, Catherine Black, to share her story with you. Catherine?
I didn't get your name.
Eddie Newsworthy, dear.
Nice to meet you, Patty.
Nice to meet you, Catherine.
Make sure you give me some good news.
Yes.
I couldn't believe my eyes. I made the news on the front page of the Brown County Journal. Headlines read, "Runs away with young man. Aged New Ulm woman has escapade with young man 50 years her junior. Leaves home and family and secretly journeys to Colorado. Discounts her son's notes and takes with her $800 in cash. Purpose of her companion, a mystery. But people are free in their guesses. Well, I was shocked when I read that. So let me tell you my story. Well, I was born Catherine Berger, and I was born in Germany in 1830. When I was 16, I married George Black. You might say it was a marriage of convenience. George was not very handsome, and he was a good man, he was kind, and he was a very good provider. But we never really had a romantic marriage. But we did have 8 children. I always dreamed about living in America. So 2 years after we were married, we immigrated to America. We lived many places. Detroit, Michigan for 2 years. Hudson, Wisconsin for 2 years. Le Sueur, Minnesota for a few years. And finally to Brown County in the town of Siegel, just weeks before the Indian uprising. Well, when it was over, we moved to the family homestead in the town of Cottonwood. Well, we lived there until my husband George passed away. I was approximately 17 years. I then made it to my final home. Or was it? It was on the farm in Milford with my 2 youngest sons, Bob and Tom. Well, running the family farm was a lot of hard work, so my sons hired a young man. His name was Joe. Oh, that Joe, he was such a charmer. He was so handsome too, and so young. Every day after his chores were done, he would come and sit by me in the front porch, my rocking chair, and we would have wonderful conversations. Sometimes he'd bring me lovely bouquets of wildflowers that he picked in the pastures. And sometimes I would give him some homemade apple pie. He just loved my apple pie. And he was so complimentary. He always complimented me on my clothes and my hair and how good I was cooking his food. And he made me feel so young and attractive. He told me that he purchased some land in Colorado and showed me pictures of it. He showed me pictures of mountains and streams and green pasture land. And I would sit there and dream about going to Colorado and living there one day. I dreamed about going there with Joe and how happy we would be living together. Well, one day there was a terrible fight between Joe and my two boys. I'm not sure what they were fighting about, but I guess they were angry with Joe because this young, handsome man was filling my head with some nonsense. After all, I am 80 and he's 30. I was so upset. I packed my bags and I moved to town. Joe did the same. He followed me to town. Well, I heard plenty of whispering from the townfolk when they would see me and Joe together. But we didn't care what they had to say because we had a secret plan. It was Easter Sunday. I was supposed to visit my daughter in Chicago. Well, I never made it. Instead, I hopped on the train with my companion Joe and we headed for Colorado. Well, when I didn't show up at the train station, my family got very worried and thought I had been robbed because I took out $800 in cash and a certified check for $1,000. Well, I needed money to live on, start my new life in Colorado. Well, I thought that was going to be my new life. So my family contacted the police to investigate. I can imagine what everyone was thinking. What a hussy! Not living up to what they might think is respectable behavior for a woman of my age. I think people were jealous. I do look and act younger than my 80 years. Joe told me that. I was so disappointed when I saw Joe's land. It was nothing like the pictures. The land was dry and rocky and barren. He told me that we were going to build a house and use my money because he had no money. So I'm like, well, why don't you have any money? He says, well, his money went to buy the land. So he told me it was only fair that I paid for the house. I thought, okay. I did love him, and he did love me. So we went into town to get some supplies and some building materials and find a place to live while the house was being built. Well, then I ran into the innkeeper. He told me I was being swindled. He told me that Joe was just sweet on me so he could get my money to build a house. And he also told me that Joe had a girlfriend in town. And the house was for Joe and his girlfriend, whom he was gonna marry. I felt so betrayed. I was angry and I was so embarrassed. How could I be so blind? How could I think? How could I believe that a younger man in his 30s could fall in love with an old woman in her 80s? Even if I didn't look and act 80. I had to leave. I just couldn't stay there any longer. How could I face my family? Oh my gosh, what could I do? I just was so embarrassed and I just didn't want to talk to my family. I didn't want to confront them. Well, finally my daughter finally found me and begged me to come live with her in Chicago. But I didn't want to. I told her I wanted to live out the rest of my life on my farm back in Milford. Well, I got my way. So, here I am in Milford, sitting on my front porch, in my rocking chair, a little wiser, a little older, and a lot poorer. But what an adventure it was.
Well, we could have told her. A 30-year-old and an 80-year-old. But then, when you're older, I can imagine that the attention of a youngster makes you feel so good. I told you earlier some of my hints. But there's also situations to avoid. As an example, never enter a bar or a tavern unescorted if you're a proper lady. I understand that even Turner Hall in the lower level had a room next to the bar where the women would sit, because it wasn't proper for them to be in the bar. All it will do is attract trouble. Or so they say. Remember the days of hitchhiking, when it was acceptable? Young men in the military would hitchhike home. Young girls wanting to make it to the big city would hitchhike. And as society changed, young women particularly were warned, do not take a ride with strangers. Well, in my many years of reporting, and of course, keeping those names a secret, there were two young girls from Sleepy Eye that got into a car, I'm told, with a very good-looking young man, I'm told, and they didn't return until morning. Ooh, imagine that, it made the newspaper. These stories we're sharing with you may be embellished a bit, but they come from great sources. Really? Seriously? Is there harm in dancing? Let me hear, is there harm in dancing? No. No, okay. Well, be aware of little white lies. They can get you into trouble. Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. And I believe Irene Wendorf, who is up next, tells a story about dancing. Imagine dancing with the devil. Whoa! Irene, we want to hear from you. It's one thing to dance, but it's another thing to dance with the devil. And it wasn't that far away from here. And I understand that it was near Hutchinson, where Irene found her devil, in disguise perhaps.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. As our MC said, my name is Irene Wendorf, and this incident happened, let's say several decades ago. And it happened to my girlfriend, my best girlfriend, Bernardina Lang, and myself. We were 15 and we were sophomores at school. I lived close to town on a farm, and Bernardina lived in town, which of course was close to the area's famous Lake Marion Pavilion. The ballroom was described as a place of grandeur, and it was constructed in a circle with a huge center support that was covered with mirrors so that the dancers could see themselves as they glided across the floor. The building was screened so that when it was in the summer and it was warm, they could take the covers off the windows and the cool breezes from Lake Marion would keep the dancers cool. Well, needless to say, neither of us had ever been to a dance there. Why? Because everybody called the place rough. What do I mean by rough? It meant there was drinking, there were fights, and since it was still prohibition, there were moonshiners that would bring their hooch and hide it under the overturned boats that lined Lake Marion. And then they'd go back and sit in the shadows and wait for people to come by to buy a pint or two. So you know why our parents didn't want us to go to Lake Marion for a dance. Well, on lunchtime on Friday, two senior boys, Jake and Ollie, which of course Bernardina and I had crushes on, wondered if we wanted to go to the dance on Saturday night to the Lake Marion Ballroom because it was going to be shut down because Lent was coming. And of course, we wanted to go to a dance so badly, and we both said yes, we would love to go. After the guys walked off, we looked at each other wide-eyed and pondered, how are we going to convince our parents to let us go? Well, we had study hall next, and we decided we would use our history assignment as our excuse. We gathered up books on the Civil War, went to the back corner of the library, and looked like we were working on our report. But we were figuring out how we could go to the dance with those two handsome senior boys. We decided Bernardina would ask her mom if I could come in on Saturday afternoon and we would finish up on our history report. And since I was already in town, Bernardina asked if I could stay overnight and my parents could pick me up after church the next day. Well, when I got home from school, I asked my parents if I could go to Bernardina's on Saturday. We had to work on our report, and then I would stay overnight and you could pick me up after church. I called Bernardina and said, hey Bernardina, I can come. And Bernardina said her parents agreed also. So I went upstairs and packed my overnight bag, put my Sunday dress in, my good shoes, and I also put that special dress I had for my cousin's wedding. Dad said he would give me a ride into town, and I was leaving. Mom called after me and told me to take my red coat, since it's going to be much colder in the morning when we had to go to church. So I grabbed my red coat and draped it over my arm, and off we went to town. After supper, the two of us excused ourselves and said we were going to go and finish our report. Bernardina said to her mother, that little brother of mine never leaves us alone, so we're going to lock the door to the bedroom so he won't be pestering us all night long. We promised, though, we would go to bed at 9, since we had to get up early the next morning for early church. As soon as we got into the bedroom, we locked the door. We did our hair, we put on rouge, we put on lipstick, and changed into our special dresses. I told the boys we would meet them 2 blocks west of Bernardina's house at 9:15. Bernardina's bedroom was on the main floor. And as it happened, it faced the backyard. So we crawled out of Berdina's bedroom window and went to meet our dates. Jake got to borrow his dad's old car, and they were waiting for us where we had agreed. And off we went to the dance. I had taken my red coat along since spring nights can be cooler, and I get cold easily. But I guess I should have left it since this Saturday night was different. It was blustery, it was humid, and it looked like a thunderstorm was going to pass through the area. And the first thing, when we got there, Jake took my coat and took it to the coat check and checked my coat so I didn't have to carry it around all night. The band had taken an intermission, so they were off stage and there was no music. With dancers with no music to dance to were mingling around, and they were talking and laughing and, of course, flirting a little bit. The four of us walked around the outside edge, seeing if there was an empty booth or a table to sit at. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder just shook the dance hall, and rain just poured down. Then another earth-shattering clap of thunder, and lightning lit up the whole ballroom. Then the lights started to flicker, and they gave off an eerie, unearthly color of green and yellow. And between the flickering of the lights and the claps of thunder, then there was a huge flash, and the devil appeared right in the middle of the dance floor. A person screamed, "It's the devil! Repent! Pray for forgiveness!" There he was. The devil's face and his clothes were spotted with soot. He had on a red suit, a long flowing cape, complete with horns, tail, and hoofed feet. Some said he came down that center pole that was mirrored, that held up the roof. And others said, no, he rose from the floor. Oh, he said nothing, but he laughed, this evil laugh, and made his way through the crowd. He walked by a section of scaffolding that was resting against the wall. He pointed at it, and it just crumbled into a heap of iron. It was mayhem. People were screaming. They were scrambling over one another to race to the exits. We were pushed one way, and then we were pushed another. The boy said, "We have to get out of this place as soon as we could." As we turned to leave, there was the devil standing right in front of us. He was smiling this evil grin, and he put out his red-gloved hand and looked at both Berdina and I and said in this deep, awful voice, "Do either one of you girls want to dance with me?" We both screamed, and the boys did not wait. They grabbed our hands and pulled us back, pulled us away from that awful creature, and we ran to Jake's car. Jake quickly started the old car, and we sped off. The four of us were in shock. Jake dropped us off not far from Berdina's house. We crawled back into the bedroom through the window and got into our nightgowns and just sat on the bed and stared straight ahead. Neither of us slept a wink that night. The next morning, we looked awful. We put on our Sunday best and waited to go to church. Berdina's mom knocked on the door and said, "It is downright cold out with a strong northwest wind after last night's rain. Both of you better put on your coats. Good thing you brought yours along, Irene." My red coat. It was still at Lake Marion's coat check. So after all the planning to get to this dance at Lake Marion, we got caught. We were both grounded until school was out for the summer. A week later in the newspaper, some witnesses at that dance said The musicians' instruments flew off the stage as the devil walked by. And the wooden ones, when they hit the floor, they just splintered into many pieces. And another one said, there was a broomstick up in the center, and it started to dance. And it danced its way down till it got to the stage where it just collapsed to the floor. But soon afterwards, in a newspaper, there appeared an editorial from a lady who lived up north. She was very skeptical and wanted to know the facts and evidence we had to prove that truly there was a devil at this dance. Facts and evidence is what she needed. Not some prankster, or could have been, or some show that maybe was orchestrated by and planned by someone who worked at the ballroom. Well, a week later, our local pastor wrote an editorial to reply to this letter. Interestingly enough, the pastor seemed to take offense that anyone would not believe that the devil appeared at Lake Marion. He claimed that only a certain class of people went to these dances and listed the events that made these dances described as rough. He went on to describe the scene that night, how the lights flickered and became ghostly green and yellow in color, how the women screamed and how people ran from the dance, stricken with terror. You know, it was as almost if he was there himself. He ended his letter stating the hotel was now deserted and that dancing among that class had ceased. Lastly, he proclaimed many who witnessed the spectacle were confined to bed because they had hysteria. And those who were hardest to convince it was a hoax were those who witnessed that evil, dark devil that night. And as you can see, I still like a red coat.
Thank you for sharing. A devil in disguise, perhaps. More helpful hints. Ladies, I apologize, men, but this is for the ladies. I say, do not chew gum. I had a cousin that when she would chew her gum, she would snap it. Anybody remember that? 50s, 60s, snapping your gum? I always wanted to be able to do that. However, I was told, and I believe many of you have been told, if you really have to chew gum, make sure your mouth is shut. And one more helpful hint. If you are going to wear high heels, my suggestion is that you practice walking at home before you venture out and embarrass yourself. Could twist an ankle, could go slip and sliding. So that's my sharing my words of wisdom with you. Stories, stories. That is what I'm all about. And I love the stories we've heard, but we're going to hear even more. Remember that men that dress in fine suits and suggest that they can transform you, like the character in My Fair Lady. True or false? Or could it be this? We are going to hear from Arlene Gruber, the Magi priestess. She's going to tell her story.
How did I do in my heels, Nanny?
You did splendid. You must have taken lessons from me.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
As Nettie mentioned, I was born Arlene Gruber right here in New Ulm, but you may address me as the Grand Magi of the Order of the Magi, whose members are descended directly from the citizens of the lost city of Atlantis. I will admit I was a bit peeved reading a number of the articles concerning my situation, in which they referred to me simply as a high priestess of the order. A high priestess is nothing but a fourth-rate member, something like a chorus girl who stands in the back with a spear. I am the Grand Magi. I've also had many inquiries as to our belief in reincarnation, and people wondering if I had any recollections of past lives. And the answer is yes, I do. Members of the public have often mistakenly believed that I was Joan of Arc in a past life. Can you imagine how ridiculous? The very idea of it, I was not Joan of Arc. I simply lived near her and knew her very well. I have a very distinct recollection of that incarnation, and Joan and I frequently talked and played together. She was a very modest and retiring girl, but she frequently told me about the visions that she had had to lead the French armies and save her beloved country. Reporters often try to guess who I might have been in a former life. Was it Cleopatra? Lucrezia Borgia? Catherine of Russia? Betsy Ross? And I always tell them, I simply will not tell you, because I can see that you are just trying to get something crazy for your newspaper. Well, anyway, as I said, my story did begin here in New Ulm. I was born right here in New Ulm right after the turn of the century, and my father died when I was a young girl, which really colored my childhood. My mother remarried shortly after, and I never saw eye to eye with my stepfather. But my mother and stepfather ran a grocery in the old Beinhorn building in New Ulm before moving the family to Mankato and eventually to Minneapolis. This was the first time that the movements of the universe worked in my favor, as it was the moment that I met Mr. Olney, who was the founder of the Order of the Magi. He was traveling and sharing with the public about the order and benefits of membership to anyone who had the sense to listen to him. And immediately, Mr. Olney recognized in me potential stirrings of mysticism, and he vowed, if I would let him, to turn me into the Grand Magi of the order. Naturally, I did not hesitate to say yes, and I devoted myself to him and to the order from that time. Now, you should know that the Order of the Magi is not like other secret societies. We were founded in the year 1300 BC, and we are the mother of all secret societies and the founder of all religious beliefs. We are the religion of the stars. To those within the secrets of our order are known the language of the stars, the movements of the planets, the secrets of the crystal ball, tarot cards, palm readings. My dear, your palm. Oh, you have quite long fingers and a long palm, which means that you are full of the element of fire. And rarely have I seen seen such a long and intertwined life and sun line, which means that you will surely live a long life full of vitality. And to our guest here tonight, is there anyone in your life who is in need of healing? Perhaps a love interest? For both of those, I have just the thing. Simply bring to me a handkerchief that has been well used by the person in question, a lock of hair from the loved one, a crust of bread that has been recently eaten on by the person, and lastly, an envelope containing $200 cash. You simply take these items, wrap them up into the bundle, and I will conduct a spell to bring you whatever you wish. You take the bundle, you place it under your pillow, and you sleep with it there for a fortnight, but do not open it, lest the spell be broken. After those 2 weeks, whatever you wish will be yours. See me afterwards. Now, back to my story. The trouble for me began only when my Mr. Only passed on into the beyond. About 8 days prior to his passing, I believe that Only knew that he was soon to know all of the mysteries of the universe. And in his care for me, he wrote me a check in the amount of $103. I simply had no time to cash it because I would not leave his side day and night as I nursed him back to health. Sadly, he did pass away, at which time I finally had the time to cash the check. His final gift to me. Well, completely unbeknown to me, my Only had a wife. Mrs. Only was residing in Chicago, and she got wind of this check, and she very quickly sent a series of officers up from Chicago to arrest me on charges of forgery and grand larceny, and to extradite me back to Chicago, the very idea of it. From the beginning, I knew that the preposterous charges were simply a ploy for them to wrangle from me the secrets of the Order of the Magi. You see, my Mr. Only knew the secrets of the fate of the city of Minneapolis. He himself was a reincarnation of King Daniel from the Bible. He was in communication with the inhabitants of the planet of Mars. It is no wonder that they were after our secrets. But they weren't to have them. When Governor Burnquist ruled in my favor that I need not return to Chicago, he was simply acting as a medium in the decree of fate in favor of the Order of the Magi. Now, my lawyer says that he prefers to leave the stars as they are and to put his faith in the more worldly processes of legal proceedings, but I know the truth of that verdict. Fate smiled on the Order and on me that day. Now, if there's anyone here tonight who would like to learn more about the secrets of the Order of the Magi, there is so much more that could be revealed. Obviously, you need to be initiated in a temple ceremony, and the ceremony could be arranged at a nominal fee. I will admit that the Order of the Magi has been having a tough go of it lately, especially in Minneapolis and in Chicago with the recent charges brought against me, but I have no doubt that the Order will rise again. The universe is always working in our favor. Nettie, do you have any interest in being initiated into the Order? Someone with a thirst for knowledge, as I observe you have, would certainly benefit from knowing the mystic symbol of the Order of the Magi.
I wonder if that mystic symbol would help me in poker, Marge Fredrickson. Or does the Magi frown on poker?
We do believe that all card games are silly. I could wrestle from a deck of cards secrets the likes of which Hoyle never dreamed. However, I do occasionally take part in a hand if the stakes are high enough. If you would like to find me, I will be at the House of 1,000 Wonders, located at 2435 Harriet Avenue, Minneapolis. You can find me there.
few more stories. I wonder about this one and if I would know any of these participants. I heard that there were 25 young ladies that were expelled from the New Ulm Public High School. Any of you here? Well, that's right, I said I would change the names to protect the innocent, so you don't have to come forward, but I might know who you are. They believed it'd be more fun to go to George's ballroom and dance instead of attending practice for their choir concert. Oh, Tiny. Hello. Some things are best written with discretion. And of course, that's me. Always writing with discretion, protecting the innocent, and like I said, sometimes protecting the guilty. It was a very hot night. It was so hot that when the couple was leaving the Nightingale Club parking lot, they were noticed by the police speeding down the Center Street hill. The police, of course, stopped the car. The man was not wearing a shirt. And of course, I will not reveal his name, as it was not his wife that was with him. Moving on. Ladies, never be too forward with a man that you are dating. Repeat, never be too forward. And the second part is really important. Do not be too eager to accept the diamond. After all, what do you really know about this gentleman? We have somebody that has a very interesting story. Her name is, well, we refer to her as Miss Breach of Promise. Anna, darling, would you please come and share your story?
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
I've been invited here this evening to tell my story. And oh, what a story I have for you. I'll just start at the beginning. My name is Anna Dorlin, and I was born in Bavaria, Germany in 1887. Our family immigrated to the United States when I was 14. It was about 3 years later that my mother died. But she did leave me with her talent and her wisdom of sewing. Oh, how I love to alter, design, and create clothing for the people in the community. I soon became known throughout the area as a very accomplished seamstress. I had my regular customers who often referred my talents to others. So it was. My business was growing, and I was very busy. Well, one day, when the door to my business opened, in walked Otto Hillsby. Oh, was he quite the looker. Tall, large brown eyes, blonde curly hair, and flashing a smile. Oh, let's just say he stole my heart. He indeed is what you call the real town dandy. He stated he had stopped by to shop. He had stopped by my shop to see if he could employ my services. His mother's friend, Martha Janke, had referred my talents. He had been at a get-together lately and had spilled red wine all down the front of his vest and his tie. And he really did like that suit and he was so hoping that I could help him out. Well, soon we were picking out the material, and I had the complete pleasure of taking the measurements that were required to make the vest. I had told Mr. Hillsby that if he stopped by next Wednesday, the vest and tie would be ready for him. Well, just like clockwork, the following Wednesday, in walked Mr. Hillsby to pick up his vest and tie. He was so appreciative of my timeliness, and boy, was he pleased with how well it fit. It being close to my closing of the shop for the day, I asked him if he would like to stick around and have a little glass of wine with me to finish off the day. Well, he readily accepted. We had a lovely time getting to know a little bit about each other. He was born and raised right here in New Ulm. Once he had acquired a job, he decided a little more freedom for himself would be obtained if he got a room at the Golden Boarding House. He was an up-and-coming banker at the Tried and True Bank of New Ulm. Then I shared with him some of my early years in Germany, and I shared what some of the voyage was like coming from Germany to America. Well, we certainly hit it off so well that he invited me to dinner to the boarding house the following Friday evening. Well, Friday took forever to arrive. I was so nervous, as Mr. Hillsby, he was my very first suitor. That was the first of my many, many visits to Otto at the boarding house. Well, it wasn't long, and we were discussing marriage. A date was set. Plans were confirmed, friends were invited, and the announcement of our upcoming marriage, which was in 2 weeks, was placed in the New Ulm Review. Well, it wasn't long after a public announcement that Otto announced to me that he had decided he just wasn't ready for marriage. Well, can you imagine my shock and disbelief? How could he do that to me? Well, the little spark of German came out to me. I decided he was going to pay. I was going to take him to court. And this is when the newspapers just started having fun as our scandal unfolded. One of the headlines read, "Well-known businesswoman rebuffed," I do say rebuffed, "by local banker." Well, approximately 11 months after his rejection, the attorneys finally announced that they were ready for the trial. The court date was set. Well, the following is going to be the newspaper account of the trial. It starts, "Rich, Rocky, and Racy, such as Anna Darling's suit against Otto Hillsby in district court." The case was the first of the day. Oh, the courthouse was crowded with eager expectations of hearing some interesting and scandalous developments. Somerville and Eckstein sat at the attorney's table, each anxious for a legal tussle. At the side of Mr. Somerville sat Miss Hannah Darling, the plaintiff, and not far away was the defendant, Mr. Otto Hillsby. Attorney Somerville read the complaint, which was alleged breach of promise. He also read the defendant's response, which for the first time in the history of legal proceedings set up the defense that the man had been seduced by the woman. Oh, there was gasping throughout the courthouse. With these preliminaries read, the trial opened. Miss Darling was the first on the stand. She told a long and pitiful story of a broken promise, liberties taken and abuse by Mr. Hillsby. She frequently interrupted the trend of testimony with sobs and a flow of tears. Well, the jury listened attentively and with deep interest. Hillsby, who later took the stand, denied every charge. Several witnesses were then introduced by the defense, all of whom attempted to prove the unchastity of the plaintiff. After arguments by both attorneys, the jury was dismissed from the courthouse. And at 9 o'clock the next morning, the verdict of $500 in favor of the plaintiff was delivered in open court, and the breach of promise was at an end. But was it the end? Mr. Hillsby went on to marry a Miss Victoria Harper at 3 months. Yep, 3 months after the close of the trial, much to the opposition of Miss Harper's parents. Mr. Hillsby did continue his employment at the Trident True Bay of New Ulm, and over the years he actually received a couple of advancements. Well, as for me, I had won the lawsuit. I felt justice did prevail as I had the $500, but I also had a very marred reputation. And I knew it was going to be very difficult to stay in the same community with Otto and his new wife, Victoria. So I took my $500, my savings, and my belongings, and I moved on with my life. I relocated to a little town north of New Ulm called Glencoe. My business was again up and growing until that day when the shop door opened and in walked the dandy from Glencoe, tall, good-looking, flashing a smile that just stole my heart. Well, later that year, I again had made scandalous headlines involving a breach of promise. The courthouse was overflowing again. I was put on the stand, telling my story with sobs and tears. And again, the verdict was ruled in my favor. I soon was again packing. Well, and you know the rest of the story. Yes, history can and does repeat itself.
All I can say to you, the men in the room, run. More stories. Need I remind you that these are true stories lifted from primary and secondary resources, printed perhaps, names changed to protect the innocent or the guilty. This one is puzzling and concerning. A local woman mysteriously fell off the roof at Byers Hotel. Anybody in this room know what Byers is? Was. Raise those hands high. All right. So, she's recovering nicely in the hospital, she was, but she claims she couldn't remember how she left the roof. There's rumor that people heard her and a gentleman having heated conversation. But, nevertheless, we wonder, could she have been pushed? But we know it wasn't her boyfriend after all. He sat very attentive at her bedside while she recovered. Sometimes you just don't know who's at your bedside. A guilty party or a special boyfriend. Can't share the names. Now on the lighter side, how many of you grew up during a time when slacks were not allowed by girls to wear to school? Raise your hands. Woohoo! Never saw my mother in slacks. So you can imagine if we girls couldn't wear slacks to school. When Florence Beck showed up in church wearing slacks, what has the world come to? Were some of the chatter as they were leaving church that Sunday. And then to top it off, Mrs. Garner took communion, wearing, no, not slacks, a sundress. Yes, a sundress. I heard that the minister spoke to her after church. Early I mentioned to you, never go into a bar unescorted. Well, I heard about one called the Mulligan Moonshine Mama, Jenny Miller, who has had even bigger problems than walking to an establishment alone. Please welcome Jenny Miller as she shares her interesting story.
They say you's a reporter. Can't be. Ain't no female reporters. Oh yeah, that's what I thought. You's a secretary, but you wants to be a reporter. All right, fine. Report if you want. I ain't got nobody else to listen to me. Nobody else is gonna tell my story. Correct. I'm incarcerated in the Brown County Jail on the charges of illegally producing alcohol. What that means to say is, I'm in jail for running shine. Yeah, you hear about a woman bootlegger about as often as you hear about a woman reporter. What? Yeah? My husband's dead. Oh? Him? He's dead of being stupid. You should have seen the write-up they did on him. The newspaper man wrote, made him sound like he was the mayor of some fine, upstanding man. They said he was well and favorably known. Yeah, he knew half the county because he was running them shine. Old fool died because he liked to sample his work. Now me, I wouldn't touch this stuff. Did you know that my husband was one of the first white settlers in Brown County? His folks brought him up here when he was 15 or so. They survived the Indian troubles. Not many what did. They lost a lot of good people that day. On both sides, I suppose. Well, after my husband passed, demand was still high for the hooch. So my son took over the still. We had it hid in the pig barn. We dug a big square pit, and then we laid boards over top of it, like a false floor, and the pigs covered up the smell of the still. My son, Junior? Yeah, well, he gets his smarts from his pa. You see, there was these girls, real pretty girls. And they come into town to the soda parlor to talk with the local boys, and those boys ain't never seen nothing so pretty in their whole lives. And these girls say, oh, well, wouldn't you be able to find us something, a little stronger that we might enjoy? Damn fools, bring them up over to the still and give them the hooch. Well, that was it. You won't believe, but these girls was undercover prohibition agents. Did you ever hear something like that ever in your whole life? Female prohibition agents? Well, that's how they come to know about the still. So, couldn't just let them take them to jail. So I said the still was mine, that I was the mastermind of the whole thing. I didn't want my son's future to be ruined just on account of he's stupid. You'll never guess what would happen then. I keep him come out of jail, right? I'm the one who's in jail. And he goes and helps out a friend. He backs up onto a rusty nail. And that went deep into his thigh. And he put a little bit of iodine on it, but he never went to no doctor. He never did nothing done with it. And he got the locked jaw. And he died at Loretta Hospital. He died of being stupid, just like his pa. So now, I got me a dead husband. I got me a dead son. And I'm sitting here in jail trying to take his licks for him. Well, here's my advice. You can't do something for what they done. They got to learn their lessons. If my son was in jail right now, he might still be alive. But he ain't. You can't protect people from their choices. One way or another, they get what's coming. Well, all right then. You got yourself your story. I'd be surprised if they put it in the paper. No one cares about a woman like me in the first place. But if you do want to get in the paper, you got to get a real good title. You can't just say some woman was moonshining. No. You gotta call me the Mulligan Mama of Brown County. And then you just might get it in the paper. You just might. And this whole prohibition thing, it ain't gonna last. People likes their drink too much. And that's a fact.
Didn't know that I got to have the mic back one more time. But as you can see, you saw tonight, women in history sometimes are celebrated, sometimes are not. Sometimes their situations are interesting fodder. And what we were able to do tonight, thanks to the research of Darla Gebhardt, the research librarian, and the rest of the staff from Brown County, and anybody else that helped with the project. It's just our way of sharing history with you. And one of the things that when I started working in history in 1981, a lot of them, the compliment that I got from an individual at a packed room like this, two ladies beckoned me to come over to them and they said, "Dear, what we love about this is you make such a boring subject like history fun." So we hope you all had fun tonight, and now I think we're going to be doing a drawing. Okay.
We have to say one more thing real quick. My name is Lauren, and I'm the programs coordinator for the Brown County Historical Society. And here up on screen, we have our upcoming events. Our first two posters on the left-hand side are regarding our book sale coming up. We're going to start collecting books, DVDs, and puzzles, even CDs as well, starting March 25th, and this is going to go until April 12th. And if you have any of these items that you'd like to donate, you can put them in our bins, which will be located in the Brown County Historical Society parking lot. And the book sale itself is going to go from April 18th, 19th, and 20th. April 18th, however, is only for the members, but we do have 2 days open to the public. We only have 2 more posters before the drawing, so we can hold on a couple more minutes. But this poster here is regarding our history book group. If you have any interest of joining our history book group, please just let me know. You can also give me a call at 233-2621, and that is my work phone number. So it only works from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. each week. And lastly, this poster here on the right is regarding our main program, which is titled Homes Built as Strongest Time. And we have our guest speaker, Lisa Bessemer, for this event. If you have any questions regarding this event, again, please give me a call during work hours. And tickets are currently on sale. You can pick them up at the New Ulm Chamber or the museum here in town. But now that I've gone through all of these posters, it's time for the drawing.
Can you believe that we got off to a rough start with that program?
All right.
6 East in Springfield. If you haven't been there, definitely highly recommended. This is for a gift certificate for them. And the winner is Jackie Schutzel. Looks like you'll be going out to Springfield again. All right, this one is for Sweet Haven Tonic. So thanks again to all of our donors for the door prize drawing. This one is for Diane Rulag. All right, and then the Bailey Creek basket the winner is Kathy Gregg. Kathy Gregg. Woo! All right, thanks again for all our door prize donors. Thank you very much for your participation in the costumes and just for being here tonight. What a fantastic program. Again, New Cat is recording, so this will be available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. Pick up your prize at the back door. But again, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. What a fantastic